Kind of, I guess. The day has finally come, everyone. The evil is defeated. The monstrous tripe Velma has been cancelled, with the integrity of the Scooby-Doo brand once again being restored to its former glory. So Velma has been reportedly cancelled after a short 2-season run on Max, right after releasing their Halloween special. Well, hey, at least it didn't end with her getting mauled to death. Although I don't even know if cancelled is the right word to use in an instance like this, as the much more fitting label would simply be, it didn't get picked up for another season. There's a difference, I swear. One implies there was intended to be more, whereas the other's more akin to, the studio's priorities have shifted and this show no longer fits what they're looking for. Which in this wonderful age of streaming is happening more and more frequently these days. You know, most shows that we remember as being cancelled too soon would still end up getting around 40 to 60 episodes. If you only got like 20 back then that was considered a massive failure. Yet today it's more like the norm. The new norm, with streaming analytics being so much more accessible to companies from age to gender to how many minutes they've watched. It's never been easier for executives to constantly try and course correct to follow the trends. And so in that regard, you know, Velma's outcome isn't out of the ordinary. If you remember when the series was coming out, everybody was ready to crap on it. We saw folks upset at the announcement of a second season, blaming this apparent success on hit watching. People giving Velma watch time just so they can go to Twitter and rant and rave about it, boosting up its numbers, and giving Warner Brothers a reason to want to produce more. I've already made a video discussing why that very much likely wasn't the reason they got a second season, it's seemingly being more of a result of a variety of factors. Such as most shows these days getting picked up with a second season already in the works in some form so that the crew can immediately move over to it after the first is done, given how long animation takes. Along with most shows having 2 seasons in mind from the get-go, so that when the first is coming out they can already have their second season announcement, providing potential viewers with some sort of intrigue. I mean, if they're giving it a second season this early, it's gotta be good, right? I think that's why so many shows get cancelled after that second season, with the studio putting little to no effort into advertising it. Again, animation takes a long time, so I'm sure that by the time said second season is finally done, the executives already have their eyes on something else, and would rather pursue that instead of producing another season of a show they already have content for to continue raking in watch time. How miserable. I mean, half the time people were getting mad over Velma it was because of some chuckleheads edited screenshots purposefully trying to make the character say stuff that would get a rise out of people. There's no way half the people ranting have actually watched the show. The biggest reason for its second season, however, and probably the most troubling for some to comprehend, is that Twitter isn't the whole world. I'm sure there are a lot of folks out there who came home from their 9 to 5, saw a new adult Scooby-Doo cartoon on Max and were interested, even more likely that they enjoyed it. Most people don't have as high a standards as your average Reddit user, and so I'm sure most Joe Schmoes over there watched Velma, consumed it, enjoyed it, and then moved on to something else. But now that the series has been cancelled with the internet rejoicing and dancing on its grave, we've started to see people from the animation industry fight back against this. To say that cheering for the end of a show you didn't personally enjoy is extremely disrespectful to the people who are now out of a job, at a point in time when jobs in this industry couldn't be more important to hold on to. That it's incredibly entitled for animation fans, many of whom don't understand the work that goes into making a cartoon on this level, should be ashamed of themselves for not understanding that one of the few new cartoons coming out, getting the axe this early is a bad thing and only further indicates the dire state the industry's in. That if a show based on one of the most recognizable IPs around had no shot of going much beyond 20 episodes, then what does that say for the hope of getting more long-running original cartoons? And then the other side of that argument is, why should we care? Why should someone personally feel bad for the cancellation of a show they didn't enjoy? And then that's kind of just the end of the discussion altogether. It's sort of hard to see eye to eye in a situation like that. And so today I felt like discussing the topic. Not even specifically about Velma, it could be about any widely hated cartoon like, Big Mouth. I recall a similar discussion when that was canned. Either way, without further ado, let's get into it. Velma is cancelled. But should we care? But first, if there's one thing I'd never want to cancel, it's my subscription to Aura. This video is sponsored by Aura. Did you know over 2.9 billion records were stolen from national public data, including a person's full name, address, phone number, and even social security number? I have one of those now, so I understand how important it is. So I sure am glad today's video is sponsored by Aura to help protect myself. Aura shows you which data brokers have been selling your info and automatically subs opt-out requests. They'll even give you fast fraud alerts for your bank account or if any other sensitive information has been compromised. Not only does this reduce the amount of spam you get, but also protects you from people who want to use your information to get into personal stuff, again, like your bank account. It's also this perfect all-in-one tool for transaction monitoring, VPN, antivirus, password manager, parental controls, and way more, all for an extremely affordable price. So stop data brokers from exposing your personal information and go to aura.com/AliceMark for a 2-week free trial and see how much of yours is being sold. Again, that's aura.com/AliceMark for a 2-week free trial, and thanks Aura for sponsoring this video. One of the big contributing factors surrounding the initial spark of hatred for Velma came from its apparent creator, Mindy Kaling. Now, I had never heard of her before. Apparently she was in The Office, which I've never seen, but something interesting to consider is Mindy Kaling never created Velma. Instead, that role goes to one Charlie Grande, who's had a long career in the television industry, being a longtime writer on Saturday Night Live, along with, more interestingly, a ton of projects involving Mindy. The Office, the Mindy Project. This really seems like a show that, while sure Mindy probably came up with, was mostly handed off to an entirely different team, with her most likely just having creative say here and there. And so, in a lot of ways, it isn't entirely fair to pin all the blame on her, but at the same time, it doesn't really change the issue at hand. So should all the heat now shift towards Charlie? There is so much work involved in creating a show that something important to keep in mind is, nobody goes out of their way to make something bad. I highly doubt Charlie envisioned his next project releasing to a 1.6 on IMDb. There are so many stages involved in making a show, never mind a cartoon where there are way more factors to consider, and because of that, way more that can go wrong. Although with Velma in particular, people's hatred towards it stemmed from concept alone. It just sounds like a weird idea, right? I think the reason the internet responded so harshly towards Velma mostly had to do with the comments that were made in response to the hate. You know, now there's a face to tie all this to, now there's someone to direct your anger towards. There's nothing worse you can do when promoting a show than actively chastise people for not being happy with the direction you're taking it in. It's then even worse to imply all those people are racist.
How people couldn't imagine a really smart, nerdy girl with terrible eyesight and who loved to solve mysteries could not be Indian.
You know, if you're making a show in the world of Scooby-Doo, the last thing you should be doing is telling people why having Scooby-Doo in it would be stupid and for babies. This PR nightmare therefore had folks going into this show wanting it to be bad, to actively support its downfall due to comments made by someone who never even wrote any of the episodes. By the way, she didn't even make that comment about Scooby-Doo, that was Charlie, but because her name is front and center in all these articles, she becomes the person it's all attributed to. Is it fair to put down the hard work of dozens of writers, artists, and animators just because of your dislike of the name that's only really attached to it for marketing purposes? Not really, no. But see, that's where this whole thing should start and end, if the show also weren't hated for not being very good. If Velma was this underappreciated future cult classic that just released under the wrong circumstances, then I'd be singing an entirely different tune, but the reality is, it's just not great. I don't think it's awful, at least not from the couple episodes I watched. Again, I don't really go out of my way to check out shows I don't think I'd be interested in. But if people didn't like it, then there's nothing you can really do about it. Surely, you can't blame all the negative response on racists or hardcore Scooby-Doo defenders. Really, I think this conversation wouldn't be taken as seriously as it is if it weren't happening at such a dark time in the animation industry. If you haven't been seeing it anywhere because this stuff definitely doesn't get the same amount of exposure compared to other issues in the industry, the animation world is in a pretty dire state at the minute. There's countless examples to highlight, from studios picking up less shows resulting in less jobs going around, obviously. We have other factors like Cartoon Network as we know it shutting down and being merged with Warner Bros. Animation, massive layoffs, you name it. That's not to mention the ever-present looming threat of AI coming after even more artists' jobs. This is for a variety of reasons I can't even pretend to be smart enough to know the ins and outs of. But basically, it boils down to executives' hasty cancellation of projects, not being willing to pick up anything that's not a reboot, along with trying to squeeze as much as they can out of what employees they do have so they don't need to go out of their way to hire anyone else to save money. It's a scary landscape right now, and it has been for the past couple years. And so hearing the news that yet another series has kicked the bucket is just another sign of how horrible of a state the industry is in. This is then made worse by the fact that animation is still not respected in the same way that live action stuff is, generally being seen as nothing but kid shit. And so while the writers and actors strikes ended with decent results, most moved on without realizing that the animators are also trying to advocate for better wages and job security. Or even worse, they just don't care. The medium isn't widely respected. Perhaps respected the least by the executives funding the shit. They don't respect the people making it, and so they just take advantage of them, because they know they can get away with it. Also, something to consider is a lot of people in animation know each other, so I reckon it isn't very nice to be struggling for a job, hear from one of your friends that their show got cancelled and will now also be out of a job, and then go to Twitter to see everyone reveling in the fact that this series got canned and all the folks working on it alongside it. They